The scorching Lagos sun beat down mercilessly on 17-year-old Aduni Bakare as she scrubbed the concrete floor of their cramped two-bedroom apartment in Mushin. Her knees were raw from hours of cleaning, her hands cracked from harsh detergents, but she dared not complain, not when her stepmother Funmi was in one of her moods. "Useless girl!" Funmi's voice cracked like a whip from the kitchen. "How many times must I tell you? The floor must shine like glass. Do you think this is your father's house where you can be lazy?" Aduni's heart clenched at the mention of her late father. It had been 3 years since Papa died in that terrible Danfo bus accident, leaving her at the mercy of the woman who had never wanted her. Before his death, Aduni had been the apple of his eye, a brilliant student with dreams of becoming a doctor, someone who would lift their family out of poverty. Now she was nothing more than an unpaid servant. "I'm sorry, Ma," Aduni whispered, scrubbing harder until her arms ached. Through the thin walls, she could hear her step-siblings Kemi and Tayo laughing as they watched TV, their school uniforms crisp and clean while hers hung in tatters. "Sorry doesn't pay bills?" Funmi stormed into the living room, her wrapper tied tightly around her expanding waist. At 42, she had grown bitter with the weight of raising 3 children on a petty trader's income. "Your good-for-nothing father left me with debts and another mouth to feed. If not for my generosity, you would be on the streets," Aduni bit back tears. Generosity? She had been forced to drop out of secondary school to become Funmi's housekeeper, while Kemi and Tayo continued their education. She cooked, cleaned, and helped with Funmi's small provisions business, never seeing a kobo for her labor. "That's why," Funmi continued, a cruel smile spreading across her face, "I have found the perfect solution to our problems." Something in her stepmother's tone made Aduni's blood run cold. She looked up from the floor, sudsy water dripping from her hands. "Solution, Ma?" "Marriage," Funmi announced triumphantly. "Brother Segun from our church has approached me. He knows a man who needs a wife, a good Christian man who will take care of you." The bucket slipped from Aduni's grasp, soapy water spreading across the floor she had just cleaned. "Marriage? But Ma, I'm only 17, and I want to return to school, maybe learn a trade." "School!" Funmi's laughter was harsh and bitter. "With what money? Do you see dollars falling from the ceiling? This man will pay a good bride price, enough to clear your father's debts and send Kemi to university." The injustice hit Aduni like a physical blow. Her dreams, her future, sold to pay for her stepsister's education while she remained trapped. "Please, Ma," she begged, falling to her knees in the spreading puddle. "Give me time. Let me find work. I'll pay you back every kobo Papa owed." "The matter is settled," Funmi said coldly. "You will meet him tomorrow. His name is Emeka Okafor, and he lives in Surulere. Brother Segun says he's different. But he has money, and needs a wife to care for him." Different. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. That night, Aduni lay on her thin mattress in the corner of the living room, staring at the water-stained ceiling as her step-siblings slept peacefully in the bedroom. Her mind raced with possibilities, running away, pleading with neighbors, even contacting distant relatives who had abandoned her after Papa's death. But where could a 17-year-old girl with no money and no connections go in Lagos? The streets were full of dangers worse than an arranged marriage. The next morning, Funmi dragged her to the local market to buy a cheap dress for the introduction. "Remember," Funmi hissed as they rode the cramped Danfo bus to Surulere, "you will smile, be respectful, and show gratitude. This man is doing you a favor by accepting you despite having nothing to offer." Brother Segun met them at the bus stop, a small, nervous man who avoided eye contact and spoke in whispers. As they walked through the residential area, Aduni noticed the houses growing larger and more impressive. "Sister Funmi," Brother Segun said nervously, "I should prepare you. Brother Emeka he cannot see. He lost his sight in an accident some years ago." Funmi stopped dead in her tracks. "He's blind." "Yes, but he's a good man, very kind, very patient. He just needs someone to help him with daily tasks, someone to be his companion." "You didn't tell me this." Funmi's voice rose dangerously. "Please, the bride price is very good," Brother Segun pleaded. 50,000 naira, plus he will take care of all her needs." 50,000 naira. Aduni watched her stepmother's eyes light. up with greed. It was more money than their family had seen at once since Papa's death. Well, Funmi said slowly, I suppose it doesn't matter. Aduni is no beauty anyway, and with her poor background, she's lucky anyone wants her. The words cut deep, but Aduni was too stunned to respond. She was being sold to a blind stranger, like cattle at market. They stopped in front of a modest bungalow with a small garden. Brother Sagan knocked, and after a moment, the door opened to reveal a man who took Aduni's breath away. Emeka Okafor was tall and lean, probably in his late 20s, with rich dark skin and a face that belonged in Nollywood movies. His eyes, though sightless, were kind and intelligent. He wore simple clothes, a white shirt and dark trousers, but carried himself with quiet dignity. Welcome, he said softly, his voice warm and educated. Please come in. As they entered the small but immaculately clean house, Aduni noticed something that made her stepmother's eyes widen with greed. Expensive electronics, quality furniture, and subtle signs of wealth despite the modest exterior. The introduction was painfully awkward. Funmi praised Aduni's domestic skills while listing her flaws, Brother Sagun nervously facilitated, and Emeka listened quietly, occasionally asking gentle questions. Aduni, he said during a quiet moment while the adults negotiated, what do you want from life? The question was so unexpected that she almost cried. No one had asked her what she wanted in years. I wanted to finish school, she whispered. Maybe study medicine or nursing. I want to help people. Something shifted in Emeka's expression. That's a beautiful dream. What stopped you? My stepmother needed help with her business. After Papa died. Family comes first. He nodded slowly as if filing away the information. Within an hour the arrangements were made. Funmi would receive her 50,000 naira plus money for a small ceremony. The wedding would take place in 2 weeks at their local church. As they prepared to leave, Emeka's hand briefly touched Aduni's arm. I know this isn't what you chose, he said quietly. His voice meant only for her. But I promise you, I will. Try to be a good husband. I will never hurt you. The sincerity in his voice brought tears to her eyes. At least he seemed kind. But as they walked back to the bus stop, Aduni caught a glimpse of something that confused her. Through the window of a house across the street, she saw a man in an expensive suit talking rapidly on a phone, gesturing animatedly. For just a moment, she could have sworn it was Emeka, but that was impossible. Emeka was blind, and besides, he was still standing in his doorway, listening to their retreating footsteps. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Funmi used part of the bride price to buy a simple white dress and arrange for a small church ceremony. She spent the rest paying off debts and buying new school supplies for Kemi and Tayo. You should be grateful, she told Aduni repeatedly. A blind husband is better than no husband. At least he won't see your flaws clearly. The cruelty of the comment wasn't lost on Aduni, but she had learned to endure her stepmother's poisoned tongue. On the morning of the wedding, as she stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of their tiny bathroom, Aduni wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But what choice did she have? The ceremony at their small Pentecostal church was simple and sparsely attended. Funmi had invited a few neighbors and church members, while Emeka arrived with only Brother Segun and an elderly woman he introduced as his aunt. Pastor Williams conducted the service with his usual enthusiasm, but Aduni felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold. When Emeka slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, his hands were gentle but trembling slightly. You may kiss the bride, Pastor Williams announced. Emeka leaned in carefully, pressing a soft, respectful kiss to her lips. For a moment, Aduni felt something unexpected, not love, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. After the brief reception of jollof rice and peppered chicken, Emeka helped her gather her few possessions, 2 dresses, a worn Bible, and a notebook filled with her old school notes that she couldn't bear to leave behind. Is this everything? He asked gently. Yes, she whispered, embarrassed by how little she owned. Funmi embraced her briefly at the door, more for show than affection. Be a good wife, she said loud enough for others to hear. Then, quieter, don't come crying to me if you're not happy. This is your life now. As they rode in the taxi to Emeka's house, their house now, Aduni felt the weight of her new reality settling around her like a heavy blanket. "Are you afraid?" Emeka asked softly. "Yes," she admitted. "So am I," he confessed, surprising her. "I haven't lived with anyone in a long time. We'll learn together." That evening, as Aduni prepared their simple dinner of rice and stew, she noticed things about the house that seemed odd. The kitchen was well stocked with expensive appliances that seemed barely used. The living room had a massive television and sound system that seemed excessive for a blind man living alone. And in the bedroom, she glimpsed what looked like expensive clothes hanging in the wardrobe. "Emeka," she said carefully as they ate, "forgive me for asking, but what work do you do?" He hesitated for a long moment. "I receive support from family, and I do some consulting work from home." It was a vague answer, but she didn't press. Everyone had secrets. That night, he gave her the bedroom while he slept on the living room sofa, despite her protests. "You need time to adjust," he said kindly. "Marriage is about trust, and trust takes time to build." As she lay in the comfortable bed, the most luxurious she'd ever slept in, Aduni began to wonder if perhaps her fate wasn't as terrible as she'd feared. Life with Emeka fell into a comfortable routine over the following weeks. He was patient, kind, and surprisingly well-educated. They would spend hours talking about books, current events, and dreams. He never demanded intimacy, never raised his voice, and treated her with more respect than anyone had in years. But there were mysteries. Phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room. Visitors who spoke in hushed tones at the front door before being turned away. Mail that arrived addressed to different names. And most puzzling of all, Emeka's incredible knowledge of current events and business matters for someone who claimed to be unemployed. One morning, while cleaning the bedroom, Aduni discovered a briefcase hidden under the bed. Her conscience warred with curiosity, but finally, curiosity won. Inside were documents that made her blood run cold. Business papers for multiple companies, bank statements showing millions of naira. And most shocking of all, medical records indicating that Emeka had undergone successful eye surgery 6 months ago. He wasn't blind. He could see perfectly. Her hands shook as she closed the briefcase and returned it to its hiding place. Why was he pretending? What kind of man had she married? That evening, she watched him navigate the house with his usual careful steps, occasionally stumbling slightly, always maintaining the facade of blindness. But now she noticed small things. The way his eyes tracked movement just slightly, how he never quite bumped into furniture, the fact that he could find things suspiciously quickly for someone who couldn't see. "Aduni," he said during dinner, "you seem troubled. Is everything all right?" "I'm fine," she lied, her heart pounding. If he was deceiving her about something so fundamental, what else was he hiding? Was she in danger? Her discovery created a wall between them that Emeka seemed to sense but couldn't understand. Aduni became withdrawn, jumping at unexpected sounds, watching him with suspicious eyes. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, when she overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. "The quarterly reports look excellent," Emeka was saying in the living room, apparently unaware that she was in the kitchen nearby. "The Abusha project should be finalized by month end. Yes, tell the board I'll attend the meeting via video call as usual. No, my situation here remains unchanged. The family still believes." Aduni's breath caught. Family. What family? "I know it's been almost a year of this charade," Emeka continued. "But I need more time. I'm finally understanding what it means to be valued for who I am rather than what I have. She's different from the others. She doesn't know about the money, doesn't treat me like a prize to be won." The conversation continued, but Aduni had heard enough. She crept back to the bedroom, her mind racing. He was rich, possibly very rich, and had been pretending to be a poor blind man. But why? And what did he mean about the others? That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wrestling with what to do. Should she confront him? Run away? Demand answers? Her decision was made for her the next morning when an unexpected visitor arrived. Aduni was hanging laundry in the small backyard when she heard raised voices from the front of the house. Through the window, She could see Emeka speaking with a well-dressed woman who looked furious. "Enough of this nonsense, Emeka," the woman was saying. "Father is dead and you need to take your place as head of the company. This ridiculous game has gone on too long." "I told you, Ngozi, I'm not ready." "Not ready?" The woman's voice rose. "You're 28 years old and hiding in this slum, pretending to be disabled, married to some village girl who doesn't even know who you are. It's an insult to father's memory." Aduni pressed closer to the window, her heart hammering. "She's not some village girl," Emeka said quietly. "Her name is Aduni, and she's my wife." "Wife?" Ngozi laughed bitterly. "You think this play-acting marriage means anything? She married a poor blind man, not Emeka Okafor, heir to Okafor Industries. When she finds out the truth, and she will, she'll be just like all the others, chasing your money." "So you don't know her?" "I know her type. Poor desperate, willing to do anything for security. Do you really think she cares about you, or just the roof over her head and food in her belly?" The words hit Aduni like physical blows. Is that really what people thought of her? That she was just a gold digger even when she didn't know there was gold to dig? "That's enough," Emeka said, his voice hard. "Leave, now." "The board meeting is next Monday," Ngozi said coldly. "With or without this ridiculous disguise, you need to be there. The company can't run itself forever." After she left, Aduni heard Emeka sink into a chair, his head in his hands. Through the thin walls, she could hear him talking to himself. "What have I done?" he whispered. "How do I tell her the truth now?" That evening, Aduni could no longer pretend ignorance. As they sat down for dinner, she placed the documents from his briefcase on the table between them. Emeka froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. For a long moment they stared at each other in silence. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "About the money?" "2 weeks. About your eyesight?" "I suspected longer, but confirmed it today when I heard your conversation with your sister." He set down his fork and rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up, his eyes, his perfectly functional eyes, were filled with pain and regret. "I can explain—" "Can you?" Aduni's voice was steady, but inside she was breaking. "Can you explain why you let me marry someone who doesn't exist? Why you let me feel grateful for scraps when you're apparently worth millions? Why you made me believe you were as powerless as I am?" "Because for the first time in my life someone saw me for who I really am," he said, his composure cracking. "Do you know what it's like to never know if people care about you or your bank account? To have women throw themselves at you not because they love you, but because they love your money. So you decided to lie to the one person who had no choice in the matter." The accusation hung between them like a blade. "My father built Okafor Industries from nothing," Emeka said slowly. "When he died last year, I inherited everything. The company, the wealth, the responsibility, and the vultures. Cousins who suddenly wanted to be close. Women who pursued me relentlessly. Friends who saw me as a walking ATM." He stood and began pacing, his movements no longer the careful steps of a blind man. "I needed to get away, to think, to figure out who I really was, outside of all that money. So I told everyone I was taking time to grieve, moved to a modest house, and started pretending to be blind. I thought it would be temporary, just a few months to find peace. And then you decided to get married while lying about who you are." "That wasn't planned," he said desperately. "Brother Segun approached me about your situation. He knew I was lonely, thought I needed companionship. When I met you, Aduni, you treated me with such kindness, such genuine care, not because you wanted something from me, but because it was who you are." "I treated a poor blind man with kindness," she said coldly. "I married a poor blind man who needed help. I never met the real you." The words hit him like a physical blow. "You're wrong. The man you've been living with, talking to, laughing with, that's the real me. The money, the company, that's just circumstances." "Circumstances?" Aduni's voice rose. "You're one of the richest men in Nigeria, and you call it circumstances? Do you know what I've sacrificed, what my stepmother took from me? I gave up my dreams, my education, my future, to marry someone I thought was in the same situation as me. "I can give you all of that back," he said urgently, School, university, whatever you want. With your money that you lied about. It's our money now. You're my wife." "I'm the wife of a lie," she said quietly, and the pain in her voice made him step back as if she'd slapped him. That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time since their wedding. Aduni lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the magnitude of Emeka's deception. She thought about their conversations, their growing friendship, the moments when she'd felt truly understood for the first time in years. Had any of it been real, or was she just an experiment in his journey of self-discovery? In the morning, she found him in the kitchen, making breakfast with the efficient movements of someone who could see perfectly. There were no more pretenses between them. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what your sister said." He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "She was right about one thing. I did marry a poor blind man. That's who I chose, who I was learning to care for. I don't know you, the real you. I don't know what kind of man you are when you have choices. I'm the same person. Are you?" she challenged. "The man I married would never have the power to lie to someone the way you lied to me. He would never have the luxury of playing with someone's life because he was bored or searching for authenticity." The truth of her words seemed to hit him like a physical force. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "I want you to go to your board meeting," she said. "I want you to be who you really are. And I want time to figure out if there's any part of this marriage that was real. And us? I don't know," she admitted. "I need to understand who I am when I'm not just grateful for scraps. I need to know if I can ever trust you again." The following Monday, Emeka attended his first board meeting in over a year. Adani watched from the window as a sleek black car picked him up, carrying him back to his real life. Alone in the house, she explored properly for the first time. Hidden behind false panels were expensive suits, watches worth more than her father had ever earned, documents showing properties across Nigeria and beyond. In his study, she found photographs, Emeka at charity events, business dinners, society gatherings. He looked different in these pictures, confident, commanding, every inch the billionaire heir. This was the man she had really married, the man she didn't know at all. Over the following days, the changes came quickly. The modest house was revealed to be just one of his properties. A housekeeper arrived, along with a driver, a security detail, and various assistants. The simple life they had built together vanished, replaced by the complex machinery of wealth. "I don't want to overwhelm you," Emeka said when he returned that evening, but everything was already overwhelming. "We can take it slowly." "Can we?" she asked. "Or is this just who you are now, who you always were?" The question haunted both of them. As weeks passed, Aduni watched Emeka transform, back into his role as CEO of Okafor Industries. The gentle, patient man she had known was still there, but now he was layered with power, responsibility, and the casual authority that came with vast wealth. "I want to enroll you in university," he said one evening over dinner served by their new cook. "You said you wanted to study medicine. We can hire the best tutors to help you catch up." "Stop," she said quietly. "Just stop." He looked confused. "But this is what you wanted, your dreams." "My dreams were to earn my education, to work for it, to deserve it. Not to have it handed to me because I married rich. But you are married to me. This is just sharing what I have. Is it or is it guilt money, payment for the lies?" The question hung between them, unanswered because they both knew the truth. The real test came when Funmi arrived unexpectedly one afternoon, having somehow discovered Emeka's true identity. "Aduni!" she called out as she pushed past the security guard at the gate. "Look at this place. Why didn't you tell me you married her rich man?" The sight of her stepmother in their beautiful home filled Aduni with familiar dread and anger. "I didn't know," she said simply. Funmi's eyes widened with greed as she took in the luxury surrounding them. "Well, now that you do, you can help your family properly. Kemi needs money for university. Tayo needs new school fees, and I have debts." "No," Aduni said firmly. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm your mother. Family takes care of family." "You sold me like cattle," Aduni replied, her voice growing stronger. "You took my father's love and turned it into servitude. You stole my childhood, my education, my dreams, and now you want me to reward you for it? Funmi's face twisted with rage. Ungrateful child, after everything I did for you. You did nothing for me, Aduni said, feeling years of suppressed anger finally surfacing. You used me, and when I was no longer useful, you sold me. The woman I've become, the strength I've found, none of that came from you. When Emeka arrived home to find Funmi still there, arguing loudly with their housekeeper, his transformation was immediate. Gone was any trace of the gentle blind man. This was the billionaire CEO, and his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. You will leave my home immediately, he told Funmi coldly. You will not contact my wife again. If you have financial difficulties, I can recommend some aid organizations, but you will get nothing more from this family. After Funmi left, cursing and threatening, Emeka turned to Aduni with concern. Are you all right? Yes, she said, and meant it. For the first time since learning the truth about him, she felt genuinely grateful for his protection. Thank you. See, that evening as they sat in the garden of their beautiful home, Aduni finally asked the question that had been haunting her. Who are you really, Emeka? When you strip away the money, the power, the lies, who are the man I married? He thought for a long time before answering. I'm someone who was raised to believe that money was the measure of a man's worth, he said slowly. My father loved me, but he also taught me that our wealth was our identity, our responsibility, our burden. When he died, I felt like I was drowning in it. He looked at her, his eyes vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. The man you married, the patient one who listened to your dreams, who treated you with respect, who wanted to build something real with you, that's who I am when I'm not trying to live up to my father's expectations. That's who I am when I feel safe enough to be human instead of just successful. But you lied to me, she said, not accusing now, but trying to understand. I did, and it was wrong. But Aduni, everything I felt for you, everything we built, together that was real. The only lie was about my circumstances, my feelings, my respect for you, my growing love. All of that was true. Growing love? She asked quietly. Yes, he said simply. I love you. Not because you're grateful or convenient or safe. I love you because you're brave and kind and strong, because you treated a broken man with gentleness, because you stood up to your stepmother even when you had nothing, because you're the first person who ever made me feel like I was enough just as I am. Tears filled her eyes, but she wasn't sure if they were from happiness or grief. I don't know if I can trust that, she whispered. How do I know the difference between love and guilt? How do I know you're not just trying to fix what you broke? You don't, he said honestly. Just like I don't know if you could ever love. The real me, the one with all the complications that come with this life. We both have to choose whether to find out. Over the following weeks, Emeka made changes that showed he was serious about rebuilding their relationship on honest ground. He moved them to a smaller house, still beautiful but not overwhelming. He reduced his security detail, simplified their lifestyle, and made sure they had time alone together without the trappings of his wealth. Most importantly, he gave her space to make her own choices. I've arranged for you to take remedial classes, he said one morning. Not because I'm paying for them, but because you earned them. The teacher is a retired professor who's impressed by your intelligence and determination. If you choose to continue to university, it will be because you're qualified, not because you're my wife. The offer was everything she had dreamed of, but it was also terrifying. Education meant becoming someone new, someone who might not fit into any version of their relationship. What if I outgrow you? She asked. What if I become someone you don't recognize? Then I'll have to be worthy of the woman you become, he said simply. She started classes the following week, rediscovering the joy of learning that had been stolen from her years ago. The professor, Dr. Adenike Okafor, no relation to Emeka, she learned, was demanding but encouraging. You have the mind of a natural healer, she told Aduni after a few weeks. With proper preparation, you could excel in medicine. For the first time since her father's death, Aduni began to believe in her own possibilities again. At home, She and Emeka began the delicate work of building a real relationship. Some evenings were awkward, full of the weight of their complicated beginning. Others felt like the comfortable companionship they had developed when she thought he was blind. Blind. "I miss him sometimes," she confessed one night. "The simple man I thought I married. He felt safe." "I miss him too," Emeka admitted. "He was the best version of myself I'd ever been. But he wasn't real. Parts of him were. Maybe we can find those parts again in this version of us." 6 months after the truth came out, Aduni passed her qualifying exams with flying colors. She had been accepted to study medicine at the University of Lagos, on her own merit with her own scholarship. "I'm proud of you," Emeka said as they celebrated her acceptance. "Not because you're my wife, but because you're remarkable." That night, as they lay in bed, together now, intimacy slowly rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, Aduni made a confession of her own. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About why I really married you." He tensed slightly. "What do you mean?" "When I thought you were poor and blind, I told myself I was being forced into it, that I had no choice. But the truth is, even then, I was grateful. Not for the escape from my stepmother, but for you. For the way you listened to me, the way you treated me like I mattered." She turned to face him in the darkness. "I was falling in love with who I thought you were, not because you were safe or convenient, but because you were kind. Because you asked me what I wanted when no one else had asked me that in years." "Past tense?" he asked quietly. "No," she said, reaching for his hand. "Present tense. I love you, Emeka, the real you, the complicated, wealthy, powerful, sometimes overwhelming you. But I also love the simple man who pretended to be blind, because he needed to remember how to be human. Even though I lied to you?" "Because you lied to me," she said, surprising him. "Because you were broken enough to need to disappear from your own life. Because you trusted me enough to be vulnerable, even if you couldn't be honest. Because you're still choosing to build something real with me, even though it would be easier to just buy your way out of the complications." 2 years later, Aduni stood in the graduation ceremony at the University of Lagos Medical School, wearing her white coat with tears of joy streaming down her face. In the audience, Emeka cheered, louder than anyone, his pride unmistakable. Later, at the small celebration they held at home, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked as they slow danced in their living room to music from an old radio. "All of it, the lies, the complications, the difficult path we took to get here?" "No," she said without hesitation. "If you had told me the truth from the beginning, I would have been too intimidated to ever really know you. If I had known about the money, I would have spent our whole marriage wondering if I deserved any of it. And now I know I deserve to be loved for who I am. I know I'm capable of achieving my dreams through my own efforts. I know the difference between gratitude and love." She smiled up at him. "Now I can choose you freely, not because I have to, but because I want to." "Choose me?" She pulled back slightly, reaching into her pocket to pull out the simple gold band he had given her on their wedding day, the day she married a man she thought was a poor, blind stranger. "Emeka Okafor," she said formally, "billionaire CEO, complicated human being and the love of my life, will you marry me? Again, for real this time?" His laughter was rich with joy and relief. "Dr. Aduni Okafor," he said, taking the ring and slipping it back onto her finger. "Brilliant physician, strongest woman I know, and the only person who ever made me feel like myself. Yes, yes, I will marry you. As many times as you'll have me." 5 years later, Dr. Aduni Okafor ran the Okafor Medical Foundation, a clinic that provided free healthcare to underserved communities across Lagos. The foundation was funded by Okafor Industries, but operated independently with Aduni, making all medical decisions. Their marriage had grown into something neither of them had expected, a partnership of equals who challenged each other, supported each other, and loved each other with full knowledge of both their strengths and their flaws. On quiet evenings, they would sometimes talk about the beginning, about the desperate girl who married a stranger, and the lonely billionaire who pretended to be blind. "Do you think we would have found each other any other way?" Aduni asked one night as they watched the sunset from their garden. "I don't know," Emeka said honestly, "but I'm grateful we found each other the way we did. The lies led us to truth. The deception led us to real love. The forced marriage became a chosen one. And the stepmother who sold me like cattle gave me the greatest gift of my life, even if she didn't mean to." Funmi had never contacted them again after that confrontation, years ago. Through mutual acquaintances, they heard she had eventually remarried a man with modest means and seemed content with her smaller but stable life. Kemi had gone to university and become a teacher, while Tayo worked as a mechanic. Neither had ever asked Aduni for help, and she respected them for that. As for Brother Segun, who had unwittingly arranged the marriage that changed everything, he continued his work of bringing people together, never knowing that his most unlikely match had become one of Lagos's most successful partnerships. "Sometimes I think about the girl I was," Aduni reflected. 17, powerless, convinced that gratitude was the best I could hope for in life. What would you tell her now? That gratitude is just the beginning. That love is a choice, not a debt. That being forced into something doesn't mean you can't transform it into something beautiful. She leaned against his shoulder, watching the last light fade from the sky, and that sometimes the most complicated beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings. In the distance, the sounds of Lagos continued, traffic, voices, life in all its messy complexity. But in their garden, surrounded by the life they had built together from lies and truth, force and choice, desperation and love, Aduni and Emeka had found something that had eluded them both for years: home. The stepmother who had forced an orphan to marry a blind man, unaware he was a billionaire in disguise, had inadvertently created a love story for the ages. Not because of the money or the deception, but because two broken people had chosen to heal together, to build trust from betrayal, and to transform a marriage of convenience into a partnership of equals. Their story had begun with the cruelest betrayal and the deepest lie, but it had become something that neither force nor fortune could have purchased, a love freely given, honestly earned, and strong enough to weather any storm.